Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 3 in MSA2, and in this video, we are going to present our sensory project report by conducting the directional pad comparison test.
For our project, we choose soy milk as our sample. So what is soy milk? Soy milk is white, creamy extract that produced from soybean. It produced by grounding between stone to create a slurry, which was then filtered through a cloth. Basically, it was first introduced in China as DU gel. As we know, each brand will produce different formulations in their soy milk. Either it is sweet, less sweet, or no sugar at all. So, due to this problem, the purpose of this project is to know whether the panelists can detect and distinguish the difference of sweetness level between the sample by using directional pad comparison test. So, the objective for our project is to determine whether the panelists can distinguish the different sweetness level of two soy milk. We have two hypotheses. First is null hypothesis, which is the panelists cannot distinguish the differences between the samples. And second, the alternative hypothesis, which is the panelists can distinguish the differences between the sample.
In this directional pad comparison test, we have gathered 60 untrained panelists ages between 18 to 35 years old from USIM, with no critical health issue to determine whether they can detect the difference of sweetness level of two soil milk samples from the same brand which is home soil. At first, we prepare the master sheet and score sheet in the preparation room. Then, we pour 9 ml of soil milk into the 8 ounces cup and label the cup using 3-digit random code number according to the master sheet, with two possible orders, which are AB and BA. Both samples were put together on the tray along with a cup of distilled water, score sheet and a pencil. After that, the sample served to the panelists at the sensory booth. The panelists will assess the sensory test according to instruction given on the score sheet. After the panelists has chosen and circled the answer on the score sheet, the panelists also instructed to complete the questionnaire. Later, the tools and the apparatus that has been used for the sensory test were cleaned up appropriately after the sensory test session was done. Lastly, we decoded the score sheet that have been completed by the panelists on the master sheet.
Next, these are the results of our test. When the samples were arranged in AB order as shown here, 27 panelists correctly identified the sweeter soy milk. However, one panelist was unable to identify the sweeter soy milk. Following that, 31 panelists can distinguish between less sweet and no sugar samples when presented in BA order, with only one panelist answering incorrectly in the test. In the case of some people being able to discriminate and having a true taste preference, and others are unable to differentiate but still choose. The total number of the panelists who can detect sweeter sample and those who cannot recognize the sweeter sample of soy milk is 58 and 2 respectively.
Now let's move to data analysis. First, we use the manually by using adjusted chi-square test. The formula is x squared equal to summation O minus E squared over E, where O is observed number of correct and incorrect choices, E is the expected number of correct and incorrect choices. And then we insert the data that we observe until we get 26.17 plus 26.17 equal to 52.34. X squared in chi-square table is 3.841 at 0.05, df equal to 1. Therefore, x squared calculation is greater than x squared table, which is 52.34 greater than 3.841. There is a significant difference between the samples. The purpose of chi-square test is used to determine if there is a statistically significant difference between the predicted and observed frequencies of this test. The chi-square critical value for a one-tail test with 1 degrees of freedom, df equal to 1 and 0.05 is 52.34. The derived S-square statistic 52.34 is greater than this value, indicating that there is a significant difference between the two samples. As a result, we reject the null hypothesis and conclude that the panelists can detect the sensory differences between two types of soy milk, which is whole soy less sugar and whole soy no sugar.
By using Microsoft Excel, the adjusted chi-square test is used to see if there is a statistically significant difference between the expected and observed frequencies of this test. The chi-squared critical value for a one-tail test with 1 degree of freedom and alpha equals to 0.05 is 3.841. The calculated S-square statistic, which is 52.27, is greater than this value, indicating a significant difference between the two samples. As a result, we reject the null hypothesis and conclude that the panelists can detect sensory differences between the two soy milk samples, which is sweet and no sugar.
By using the Minitab software, using chi-square table at 5% level of significance with degree of freedom 1 is 3.841. Chi-square calculation is greater than chi-square table, which means the samples are significantly different at 5% level of significance. Thus, we reject the null hypothesis, which means most of the panelists can detect the difference in terms of level of sweetness between the two samples.
Next, we move to the SPSS method. For this method, the value that we get is 60.000. It shows that the calculated value for SPSS is greater than table value, which is 3.841. It is significantly different, thus we reject the null hypothesis. It shows that the most panelists made the correct judgments as they can distinguish the difference between the two samples.
Now, we proceed to the discussion. The findings of this test indicate that there are very significant differences in the sweetness levels of the soy milk produced by home soy. The panelists are able to identify the distinction in sugar level between the two samples that were used in this test. This is perhaps due to the fact that the quantities of sugar used in the manufacturing of the two samples were not identical. In fact, A sample promises higher level of sugar, but no sugar is added in sample B. The difference in total sugar content between the two samples is 30%, which indicates that there is a really large gap in the total sugar content.
Last but not least, for the conclusion, we can conclude that the objective of this directional path comparison test has been achieved, as it shows the significant. Two types of soy milk have been tested, which are whole soy less sugar and whole soy no sugar. Based on the result of this test, 58 got correct judgment, while the other two panelists got incorrect judgment. The data was analyzed using 4 various methods, which are manually and by using different software such as Excel, Minitab, and SPSS. Besides, the data and the results that were obtained from 4 different methods also show the significant difference. Thus, the null hypothesis is rejected. This means that the panelists could detect the sensory differences between two types of sample of soy milk. In fact, both types of soy milk have different levels of sweetness since the amount of sugar are varies. home soy less sugar contains 30% less sugar than the original one, which is sweeter, while home soy no sugar contains no sugar. Moreover, these two types are different in sugar concentration. These two characteristics influence the panelists to differentiate between the two samples of different types of soy milk. That's all from our group. Thank you.